So the fighters get vectored in on this airplane, and they pull up behind these two guys flying in this MD-87 that they don't know is stolen. And, they get in position behind them. And now they pick up the phone and they tell the controller, call that airplane and tell them, per National Command Authority, you're being diverted to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And they had told the fighters that if they twitch in the wrong direction, they had already pre-discussed this, and we listened to this. First fighters to go in front of them, fire the chafe, and give them 30 seconds, and if they don't comply, they were going to blow them out of the sky over top of one of the Great Lakes.
Coming up on today's episode of the 21.5 Show, our listeners' crazy, interesting, and funny stories from the world of aviation.
You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Welcome to the 21.5 Show, a podcast for professional pilots by professional pilots. Join Dylan and Max, both with experience in flight instruction, the airlines, and business aviation, as they talk to a variety of industry experts, share stories, and have a little fun along the way.
We're back. It's another episode of the 21.5 Show, the Professional Pilots Podcast by two professional pilots. My name is Dylan.
And this is Max.
Not a lot of great news in aviation recently.
It's rough. Very rough, but we will persevere. We're going to put a spin on this episode to remind everybody why we do this crazy business in the first place.
That's right. We reached out to many of our listeners and members on ProPilotWorld.com. We said, hey, let's have an episode where we just talk about aviation stories. Something to keep our minds off of all of the craziness right now. And the people delivered in spades, I would say.
They would. We got way more stories than we can put in one episode is the good news. So
yeah,
we've built up a bank of stories, if you will. Some are long, some are short, about everything under the sun, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we're looking forward to sharing those with you guys today. We will be back with other more relevant episodes in the future, of course, probably talking to James O'Neill and others again about the state of the industry and what we're supposed to do. But for now, we're just going to take a break and relax. And then after the stories in this episode stick around, we do have an exciting announcement for the show. And I'll give you a hint. You can get some Straight Talk with Ted merchandise.
Ooh.
It's what everyone's demanding.
Hopefully the internet can support that kind of traffic.
I know. We're going to become millionaires.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's really it. We're going to kick things off with a call from Mark, who is the founder of Pro Pilot World, since he kind of helped us set this whole thing up with getting all the users to submit stories. So let's jump right into that.
Hey, Dylan.
How you doing, Mark?
Doing well.
We've got our buddy Mark on the line, the founder of Pro Pilot World. Welcome back, Mark.
Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me back on. It's always good to speak with you guys, and hope things are going well for you in this, well, let's call it interesting times that we all find ourselves in.
Yes. I think that's a good way to put it. So, Mark, when we talked to you back in July, we were talking about Pro Pilot World, and I can't remember if it was me or Max or you who said it, but we said, times are pretty good right now for pilots, but it's not always going to be the case, and you got to keep that network strong, and there's going to be a time when you're going to need to fall back on it, and unfortunately, I think we're kind of back in those times already.
Oh, I agree. I agree very much. And that's the thing. People come on Pro Pilot World sometimes, and they'll network and they'll find a job, and then they might let their membership expire. And sometimes, if they contact us, we'll ask them, why, or we always want feedback. We're always trying to improve the place. And a lot of times they're like, oh, I've got my, forever job and I don't need to network anymore. And I always just kind of cringe when I see that. Everybody makes their own decisions, but the time to be networking is when you don't need it, so that your network is strong and in place when you do actually have to rely on it. And I think people forget that. And these last 10 years, it's been pretty good. And some of the people are younger, so they haven't seen a cycle. Some of us have been around for a few cycles and have seen some pretty bad times. And I think this is going to further focus people on how important it is to have a network, because when things do pick up and people are looking for a job, it's the people with a strong network that are going to land the jobs the quickest, and they're going to land the best jobs.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
I agree.
It's crazy how fast it happens. It's like when we were talking to James O'Neill the other day, he goes, when the music stops, it just stops. It doesn't slowly fade out.
It doesn't draw down. Yeah. That's for sure. Yeah.
So
yeah, there's not usually a warning, just like 9/11. I was in Teterboro, New Jersey on 9/11. I got in the night before, and you woke up that morning and you never thought what was going to happen that day, how much the world changed by that evening. And the music comes to a screeching halt, and that's what people don't realize. When times are good, it's a rational exuberance, and everybody thinks that it's never going to end, and it always ends, and it'll start back up again too. But you just never know how long it's going to take and where you're going to end up when it does start back up.
Yep. Exactly right. Well, that's why we love the ProPilot World website so much, is because it is a great place to network. It's got a lot of the great job postings we've talked about. We've been doing these episodes with James, and they're serious because it's a serious time. But we wanted something to take our mind off of this uncertain time right now. And so we thought, let's talk about some stories. So we put a thread up on ProPilot World, and man, your users come through every time, because the new and unique stories that were posted there, I mean, it's just like they just turn the spigot on and off they go.
There's a tremendous amount of experience on the site, and yeah, you've got guys from all different backgrounds and all different experience levels, and you couldn't imagine one person ever experiencing all that. But when you bring the whole group together and you can learn from everybody and hear their stories, and one thing that's really showing through during this time is that everybody's really supporting each other, and there's a lot of good information, there's a lot of good discussions. And I think if nothing else, people just have a place to come and discuss topics and to speak with other people that are, have similar backgrounds and similar interests. And it just lets them know that, we're all in this together. We're not alone, and you've got somewhere to go to talk to people that are dealing with many of the same things that all the members are dealing with right now, all the uncertainty going forward. So I think that definitely plays well, and the membership's been very active. I mean, I can go look at the statistics and see when things really spiked, when things got out of hand here earlier in March.
Oh, interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
That'd be interesting. No,
the traffic's gone up. Huh?
Yeah, traffic's definitely gone up. That tends to happen when there's major aviation events. If there's a major crash or something, people they'll turn. They might not have been on a site for a few weeks, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I got to go find out what's going on. And so yeah, traffic's definitely been up pretty substantially for the last few weeks. Because everybody's coming to find out. They're trying to find out what's going on in the industry and what other people are dealing with and what other people's thoughts are, and kind of an outlook. Everybody's got their own take on what's going on, and it's good to discuss it and to get other insight. And that's really what's happening. And ProPilot World's really, playing into a very important part of that for the pilot population.
Yeah, I think that represents kind of the boots on the ground perspective versus the news that may have some spin to it sometimes, you know what I mean?
Well, Mark, thank you so much for the community again, and definitely encourage all of our listeners to check it out. If you're not a member, it's propilotworld.com. Job postings, great networking, and really good stories. And most of the stories you're going to hear on the show today are from ProPilot World members, so it's a real treat, and be sure to check it out.
Well, guys, thanks again for having me on. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And more importantly, thanks for being members of ProPilot World and, bringing your podcast to the membership. And I think everybody's really enjoying it. And I think you guys are getting a lot of good input from the members as well. So I think it's working out well for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Stay safe.
Okay, guys, take care. Stay safe. And hopefully we all get flying again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mark.
See ya.
Okay. Bye-bye.
A great story I forgot to tell you guys about. So back in the regional days, hotshot regional captain, I was flying down to Mexico, and it just happened to be during spring breaks. We had the plane was packed with a bunch of spring breakers, and I think we can all agree that the last thing you ever want to do on an airplane is go poop. But sometimes you don't have a choice. Well, this happened to be my one time. So I've had one time in my entire flying career where I didn't have a choice, and it happened to be on this flight. So I went back, and on the plane that we were flying, you guys probably remember the lavatory is in the back of the airplane.
Right.
So, it's uncomfortable enough as it is walking, because, the pilots aren't supposed to leave the cockpit. So you get all these looks as you're walking back towards the back of the airplane, like, what are you doing? So I do that. I take the walk to the back, and then I go and I do my thing in the aft lavatory. And as you can probably imagine, it was one of those times where, like I said, you don't want to go unless you have to, and I didn't have a choice. So I get done doing my thing and open up the door, and of course, a green cloud of smoke trails me as I walk up the aisle past about 50 spring breakers.
All the co-eds.
All the co-eds. This hotshot captain walking back up and just completely annihilating the cabin for the last hour of the flight.
Now, did you leave the cockpit door closed when you pulled into the gate?
Of course I did. I'm not a rookie.
Shame.
The old flight level 360 crop dusting. That's a new move.
Highly recommend it if you have no shame. But yeah,
I never had to do that in the ERJ. Did you take a newspaper or the USA Today?
No, there wasn't. I probably did have a USA Today, actually.
Yeah,
now I think about it. That was, not in the cockpit, of course. I just had it just for those.
Right. You stopped and grabbed it out of your overhead as you were walking.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Did the jumble work, the Sudoku?
That's good.
Yeah. You guys have never done that before?
I don't think I ever had to do. We all flew the 145. I don't think I had to do that.
I think it took a leak back there, but
I don't think I had to.
Never did that kind of walk of shame.
Yeah. Well, it was definitely a low point. Depending on, now I wouldn't care. I think it would be kind of funny, but back then I was pretty mortified. So, well.
Listen,
good stuff.
That's right. All your stories are of bad things happening to you.
It's true. For the third call, I'll find something else to talk about.
Next one will be a story of him getting furloughed.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you give me a couple months and then call back? And we'll talk about that
but if he gets furloughed, that means I'm furloughed. So hopefully it doesn't come to that.
Oh my God! All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right, man.
Yeah.
No good. Shit.
Good afternoon. This is David.
Hey, David. It's Dylan and Max with the 21.5 Show. How are you?
Hi, David.
Hey, gentlemen. How you doing?
Good.
So this happened about a year and a half ago. I was on a CJ3 trip with a first officer. It was fairly new to flying charter. And we were out in Vernal, Utah with a client for the day. It's a real early morning departure. I think we were wheels up at like 5 a.m. So started early enough that we were both tired, and we actually both at that time lived 2 hours from where the airplane was based. So we'd gotten up especially early to drive to the airport and get to Utah, go out and find breakfast at a local diner, go back to the airport, get the airplane fueled, take a brief nap. We're expecting the client to be ready mid-afternoon. So after a half-hour nap or so, we said, well, we're going to be starving if we wait, so let's go find some lunch. And, oh, that's right, we need to pick up some, I believe it was Tito's vodka, if I remember correctly, that the client had requested for the trip home. And, of course, I had not done very many trips to Utah. Wasn't quite expecting how difficult it would be to find vodka in Utah. So we did ultimately find the one liquor store in town that would have such a thing. And we're walking out the door with the bag in hand and putting the receipt in the wallet to add to the expense report later. And we had, on the drive to the liquor store, we had identified that there was a Mexican restaurant that had great reviews on Yelp and sounded like a good place to go get lunch. So we're walking out the door of the liquor store, headed to the courtesy car, and the phone rings. And the client's on the line. He says, "I'll be there in 40 minutes. I'm going to be done a little early." Well, it wasn't a little early. It was like 3 hours early. And both my first officer, Nate, and I looked at each other and we went, "Yeah, we're not going to make it till we get back to just north of Chicago where we're based. We got to get something before we leave. What are we going to do for food on, a moment's notice?" So pull up the phone, and sure enough, there's a Taco Bell just down the street on the other side of town. And I don't know if you guys have been to Vernal, Utah or not, but there's not a whole lot there. So we were kind of, surprised that there was a Taco Bell in town, pleasantly so. And so we pull into the Taco Bell 5 minutes later or so, and Nate, the first officer, gets a phone call from the office. So he's on the phone when we walk into the Taco Bell, and I said, "Hey, Nate, what do you want? I'll order it for you," right? So walk up to the counter, and I'm standing in line, and there's a elderly lady about 5'4" in front of me in line, and she orders her burritos or tacos or whatever it was, and goes and sits down with an elderly gentleman who I presume was probably her husband. I order our food, and then I'm just kind of standing there between the counter and the kiosk with all the sauces and napkins and so on, waiting for the food to come up. So a few moments later, the same elderly lady gets up from her seat, retrieves their order of food, and then walks over to get some napkins and whatever it was they needed. And as she turns to go back to the table that she was sitting at, she sort of pauses mid-stride. And I could tell that she's about to say something to me. And so I'm like, kind of puzzled because she doesn't know who I am, and I'm wondering what she's about to say. And she comes over to me, and our pilot uniform is, black slacks with a gray polo shirt and the company logo on the polo shirt. And the logo, the company name has advisor as part of the name. So she comes up to me and she goes, "So are you an advisor or a pilot?" And I was a little bit caught off guard, and I said, "Well, usually a pilot, but occasionally an advisor. Why do you ask?" And she says, "Well, you look like a pilot." So I said, would you have known if I wasn't wearing this shirt?" And her response is, "Oh, yes. You look like a pilot." "Well, what do you mean?" "Oh, pilots are sexy." And of course, this lady is like probably 75 or 80. I mean, the epitome of little old lady. I was, again, kind of taken aback for a moment. And I said, "Well, thank you." And what I was thinking when she said pilots are sexy is that, a lot of us tend to have a certain air about us when we're on the job. It kind of goes to the pilot ego in my mind, that certain way of carrying ourselves. And so I said, "Well, sometimes pilots do have a big ego." And she goes, "Oh, no, they're sexy. I might be old, but I know sexy." And I'm just kind of dumbfounded, and she walks away. And, the first officer walks over. He's like, "What was all that about?" And I related this to him. And I, just about finished explaining what she was saying to me. And I overhear her, not sitting probably 20 feet away from us with her husband. And he says, "Who was that?" She goes, "Oh, I was talking to that sexy pilot over there." They say that when you're a kid, you can get away with anything. And when you're old, you can get away with anything. And I guess that particular experience is a case in point of when you're old, you can get away with anything. Anybody else younger than her, I would have been like, "Okay, am I being hit on here?" like, I've got a wedding band on. I can't quite figure this out. But I mean, we had so much fun laughing, driving back to the airport and getting ready for the client to arrive at the airport with that one. And every time I see Nate, the first officer, he's since moved on to another company. Every time I see him, we have a great time talking about that experience.
Gotta love small town Utah, I guess, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And little old ladies who have no filter. I mean, it's certainly not the first elderly lady that I've met who was, a bit of a spitfire, but it was probably one of the most memorable experiences I've had while on the road.
That's the beauty, I guess. At some point, you get to a certain age and you're like, screw it, say whatever I want.
That's right.
I love it.
Yeah, I certainly would not imagine anybody our age getting away with that sort of thing.
Well, I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know. But
yeah.
What the kicker for me was that her husband or significant other was sitting at the table with her.
Maybe she was just trying to put him in check a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that you guys are doing this, and I appreciate the hard work you put into the podcast. I think it's a great resource, and I've certainly enjoyed it since episode 1.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
And we want to thank our sponsor, Harvey Watt, of course, who offers the only true loss of license medical insurance available to individuals and small groups. Because Harvey Watt manages most airlines plans, they can assist you in identifying the right coverage to supplement your airline's plan. Many buy coverage to supplement the loss of retirement benefits while grounded. Visit harveywatt.com to learn more.
Hey, Dylan, how's it going?
What's happening? I got Max on the line. Well, what do you have for us?
So it was back when I was flying charter back in 2006 or so. And we showed up for a flight and my co-pilot arrives and walks over to me rather gingerly. And he's like, "Hey man, I got a problem." He's like, I'm a little sore in the rear end. I'm like, "No way, what's going on?" He's like, "Well, I tried to tie a hemorrhoid off with some dental floss." And it didn't quite work out. And there was some like bleeding going on. So he basically sat sideways. I think we went to like New Mexico and then like South Dakota. And he basically was sitting sideways the whole way. And,
oh, no.
I was kind of babysitting the whole way up there. So moral of the story, don't tie off your hemorrhoid by yourself. Use CRM, right?
Use CRM.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we didn't have like nice leather seats. Of course, it was like the seat that was, that sheepskin or whatever. It was awful. The things we do for who we fly with, right?
Yeah, right.
How did you clean that up?
I didn't. Maybe scissors. I don't know. Maybe got a haircut.
Oh, God. So, can you imagine sitting? Like, why would you do that on a trip? Like when you know you're going to go.
Dude, well, maybe desperate times call for desperate measures. Who knows?
Yeah.
We're bored with YouTube. It's dangerous.
I know, right? Yeah. So, rely like CRM. There's a silver lining there or something, right? Tell me about a time.
Yeah, right. That's a good one. Oh man, what else? You got? You flew for somebody else, a high profile.
Yeah. So this was a trip back in, back in the charter days. It was Carol Burnett, and you guys probably have experiences like this where you get off the plane and they're like, "Oh, come to dinner with us," or "Come do this," and like you never hear from them.
Right.
And it was a lot of lip service. And she's like, "Do you guys want to go to the show?" And we're like, "Sure." So we go to it was in Canada, it was in Vancouver. So we show up to the theater, and of course, like we go to the counter, like, "Yep, your tickets right here. They were left for you." And then when we get off the plane, she's like, "Make sure you come back because we're going to have a party after." So again, we're just like, "Okay, we'll see how it goes." Usually they don't remember us, whatever. So the show's over and there's like a pile of people just like crowding down front, trying to get backstage. And her assistant comes out and was like, "Those two guys right over there, they need to come forward. So it was just an example of like someone being true to their word. And it wasn't, the thing that means a lot to me is like if you follow through with what you say. And she was great. She made it a point to like make sure that we got backstage, went to the party and whatever. And but she was really a class act.
That's awesome.
She still is.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really good. My experience with I flew Cher one time, and she was not happy to be on the Challenger. Like she's looking at this and she goes, "This is it." Like I'm sorry. So her outfits were so heavy. I couldn't believe. I actually had a lot of respect. We had to load a ton of their costumes and performance stuff.
Sure.
The gowns weighed so much. I was like, I can't believe that people are wearing these and performing and doing everything. But
no kidding.
It was crazy. But the funny part was the airplane I was flying at the time had a really light interior. The seats were like this cream color. And,
lovely.
So she was in jeans, and of course we left, and then her jeans marked up the seat, and it was the seat that was rear facing club seat, like right where the principal normally sits, so he can see every time.
Of course.
So I'm like, so we're trying to scrub it and clean it, and I'm like, oh man, what a bummer. We couldn't get it really clean, and so we go to the owner, and we're like, hey man, sorry, this Cher kind of marked up your seat. And we thought he'd be bummed out, and he was like so happy. And it was his favorite story to tell every single person on the airplane, because that was like in his generation. Like,
don't clean that seat anymore.
Yeah. And he started to sit in that seat.
Oh, he loved it.
Right.
That was the first thing he showed everybody. So it was pretty funny. So
nice.
Sometimes that stuff works out, but that's good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, great idea. Trying to spread some laughs.
Yeah.
And we'll get through it.
Appreciate your time, man.
All right, man.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bye.
Yeah.
All right, Max. Ty called in. He's got a good story for us, a rotor ring story, I think, which might be a first for us.
Right.
Huh?
We'll change of pace. That's good.
Welcome, Ty.
Thanks, guys. So, yeah, I was, one of the many things I've gotten to do is move helicopters around all over the world. And we were ferrying a helicopter one day from the Portland area in Oregon, and we were headed to Costa Rica. So it was going to be a 3-day trip. And, it's drooling 110 knots. You're not going anywhere too fast. And helicopters aren't the most efficient things in the world. So we had auxiliary fuel tank, and we were loaded up. This is an aircraft that kind of follows a research vessel around the world. And so we had all of our extra parts and tooling and everything. So, floor to ceiling stacked up, aux fuel tanks full. We've been flying at 9,000 to 10,000 feet just to save fuel, which for somebody who's scared of heights, not a fan. Anyway, so we're down there in Texas, and we'd called ahead to the FBO. It's a Sunday. And we said, so we're making sure everybody's going to be open. Everybody said they're going to be open. We landed in FBO and nobody around. Fuel's all locked up. And so we're kind of scratching our heads. And we look at ForeFlight to see the next available spot where there's some self-serve. It was about 50 miles or so south of there. And we're like, oh, that's no problem. We got plenty of fuel. We can do that. Until we took off and had a 40-knot headwind.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's always the way it works, right? So we start trucking along, making our way down to the next airport. And we're starting to get pretty low on fuel. And both of us are talking about it. And we set a number. We said, all right, at X amount of gallons, we're going to land the helicopter, no matter what. No reason to push it and ruin a, $3.5 million machine. So sure enough, that number came up on the screen, and we said, all right, let's put it down. We were right next to an interstate. So we landed. We could see the airport. That's the most painful part. But we had made a deal. We're like, this is the number, no matter what. So we land the helicopter next to the interstate. Like I said, it's Sunday. We land next to a house in hopes that there's somebody home to
with
give us a ride. Or, yeah, with
a gas can.
Can we get some diesel tank? Yeah. So we land there. And, when a helicopter lands next to your house, you'd think people would just come out and wonder what's going on. Well, the only thing that was out there was like a man-eating dog. So we were just sitting there as this dog's barking at us. And we're like, well, what do we do? So we start making phone calls. And the other guy I was flying with, his mom is one of the owners of the company. And so he calls her and she says, well, this has happened in the past and we've just called the sheriff's office and they come give us a ride and we get fuel. It's like, oh, that sounds like a great plan, So we call the sheriff's office and they couldn't figure out what we were talking about. They're like, so did you crash? I'm like, no, we just need a ride to get some gas. And so they end up calling the airport tower, or Tracon or somebody, and reported that we'd crashed. Yeah, so now this is escalating. In the meantime, the guy that lived in that house finally comes out to see what was going on. And I asked him if he'd give me a ride into town to get some gas can and take me to the airport. And he's like, oh, no problem. So he goes, gets his pickup and pulls around, and he's got a Tecate in his hand and a couple in the console. And he's like, let's go. So we go driving down the highway, sitting there drinking his beer. And so it's already off to a strange start. And so I leave the other pilot with the aircraft. We go to the gas station down the road. It's one of the only things open. Everything's closed. It's, Sunday in Texas. And all they had were these dust-covered 1-gallon cans. I think there was 8 of them.
Oh.
And so like $120 later, I buy these 8 1-gallon safety cans. And like I said, we could see the airport when we were flying. So we were that close. We just needed a little bit to get us there. So I buy all these gas cans. He drives me to the airport. I go to the self-serve pump after I finally figure out how to get in the gate. And it's the little tiny filler necks on these gas cans. So I probably put 8 gallons of Jet A on the ground for the 8 gallons in the cans. So this is it's still going really well. So then we go to put him in his truck. Well, he doesn't have a tailgate on his truck. So I was like, well, you mind if I put these in the back seat? They're all stinky with jet fuel. And he's like, oh, that's fine, as he cracks another beer. So I throw those in the back of his truck. We get driving back to the helicopter, and we're about, a quarter mile away, and all I see is emergency vehicles. I just see lights on. I'm like, oh, no. So there is 2 Border Patrol trucks, 2 Sheriff's Office vehicles, and the other pilot is all but handcuffed. I mean, they're interrogating him. They think we're smuggling drugs because we're right on the Mexican border. And even though we'd called him and told him what happened. So while he was smoothing it over with the authorities, I put our 8 1-gallon gas cans into the aircraft. Meanwhile, the guy that's been drinking and driving me around, they don't even question his beer in his hand if we pull up to the police officers.
It's just Tecate. I mean, it's basically water.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So we, I put the fuel in there. I give this guy the gas cans as a thank you. He was all excited. The authorities let us go. We fire up. We fly the 3 miles or whatever it was to the airport, top off the aircraft, and then flew our last leg for the day to Brownsville. So it was an entertaining start to our journey.
So it took basically 3 days to get to Costa Rica?
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, it's about 3-hour hops, 2.5 hour, 3-hour hops.
So you probably made a dozen fuel stops at least, huh?
Yeah, I had to look at my logbook to remember. But yeah, it's like 4 stops a day, right? So there's 3 stops
cow. So. Thanks for reaching out, Ty. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. You guys have a good one.
All right.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Hey, is this Pete?
It is.
Hey, Pete, this is Dylan, and I've got Max on the line also. We're from
Pete.
the 21.5 podcast giving you a call.
How are you guys doing today?
We are great, and we're looking forward to your story.
Okay, so back in, I want to say it was 2005, my then business partner and I decided to purchase a group of MD-87s from an airline and convert them into basically a poor man's BBJ.
Okay.
And we contracted a company that is now defunct in Fort Worth, Texas, to do the interiors, and had Spirit Airlines, which at the time had a maintenance facility there, do the maintenance. And we were going to tank the airplanes with some additional fuel tanks. And I ran this project for, I guess it was about 18 months. And the first airplane we sold to what was then the largest privately held company in Russia. That company is now defunct as well. The company is called RFK Sistema. So RFK Sistema buys the airplane. They give us a large deposit and then a series of performance incremental payments. And throughout the process, they changed our, let's call it, base model of the airplane and put in several change orders.
Okay.
They were the first customer that we had that decided they wanted to put the tanks in the airplane. All of the work on the airplane, the interior and the tanks, were going to be done by STC, not a 337 field approval. So at the same time, we were dealing with the FAA getting the STC done. In any event, about 8 or 9 months into it, the Russian owners, and we had a contact there, started to give us issues on the airplane. One of the biggest ones, which is actually kind of a funny anecdote to this whole thing, was they came to us and said, "You haven't sold us an MD-87, it's an MD-83.
Okay.
And I said, "No, it's an MD-87. No, it's an MD-83. Our experts, and we had these Russian experts there, said it's an MD-83. No, it's an MD-87. Nope. Look, the type certificate, the plate says MD-83. Well, all MD-80s are now MD-83s. The type certificate says the same thing. And in any event, we went through this with them for a week. Oh, you're right, it is an MD-87. 2 days later, no, it's not an MD-87. So what I ended up having to do was, and this just kind of puts you in the mind of Russian aviation experts, I finally got so aggravated on a Friday. I went out into the hangar, I grabbed the two Russian aviation experts. I'd gone to the local store and bought a measuring wheel. And I put a piece of tape on the front of the airplane where the nose is. I put a piece of tape on the back and measured it off with the walking wheel. And whatever it came out to, it was like 98 feet or something. I said, "What does that say?" He says, 98 feet. We went in, we looked up MD-83, we looked up MD-87, and sure enough, he goes, "Oh, it's 98 feet. You're right, it is an MD-87. And that was how that whole thing ended. So in any event, the Russians wanted the airplane, and we said, "Well, you've made all these change orders. We need to get it certified by the FAA." So things started to get rather hostile with the whole thing, and they still owed us about $3.5 million for the airplane. The sale had actually not gone through yet. Everything was being held by an escrow agent. So at the time we were operating probably around 25 airplanes worldwide, and had all the tail numbers in FlightAware. And I was home on a Saturday and having breakfast, and my phone beeps. And I look, and it says, November 871 Delta Pop, which was the tail number of the airplane, has filed a flight plan to Gander, Newfoundland. And then has filed a second flight plan from Gander, Newfoundland to, I want to say it was Riga, Latvia. And I'm like, well, that's really freaking weird. Who would be using that tail number? Because we had purchased, or we had not purchased, but reserved from 871 to 874 Delta Pop, all in line for these airplanes. And it's really strange that the airplane that's supposed to go to Russia is now filing flight plans to go to Russia. And our corporate attorney and their corporate attorney had been back and forth, and they threatened us with lawsuits, and we threatened them with lawsuits. So I called my director of maintenance, who was running the project down in Fort Worth, and said, "Hey, Troy, I need you to do me a favor. Can you go over to the airport and see if anything's going on over there?" I was living in New Jersey commuting. 20 minutes later, Troy calls me back. He goes, "Hey, boss, you're not going to like this." And I said, "Well, what's that?" He said, "The airplane's out of the hangar. It's being fueled, and my card key doesn't work, and they won't let me in." I go, "What do you mean your card key doesn't work and they won't let you in?" He said, "They literally said on the phone, 'Sorry, Troy, we can't let you in.'" So
this is an FBO or a hangar, or like your maintenance hangar, or what is it that they wouldn't let you into?
There was a company called Phasar Aerospace, and we had contracted with them to do the work. So Phasar tells our local project manager, "We're not letting you in." So we get on the phone with the attorney, their attorney, the people from Phasar, and as we do this, they start the airplane up and they taxi out. And, we're telling their attorney, "Listen, it's not your airplane. You guys don't own it yet." "Well, that's going to be a matter for the courts to take up, and up. And, typical lawyer bullshit. And as we're talking, my phone beeps and I click over and it's Troy. He goes, "Hey, boss, the airplane just took off in the air. It's gone." I said, "You got to be kidding me." He said, "No." So later on, when we found this whole thing, flushed out a lot of the details of this, I was told that when the airplane took off, the vice chairman of the company, Sistema, said, "Ha, we have the Americans." and that was a quote. So the airplane blasts off, and right after the airplane blasts off, their attorney says, "Excuse me, I've got a call coming in." He picks up, and I'm sure he got a call saying airplane's gone. And he got back on the phone. He said, "Gentlemen, nothing else to discuss. The airplane's on the way to Russia, and I guess you'll eventually see us in Delaware court. You're going to have to fight it out with a soon-to-be defunct corporation." And he hung up the phone. So now we're like, wow, what do we do? And we're talking back and forth, and everybody's trying to make a plan, and we know that there's really not much that the courts of Delaware can do. So all of a sudden I said, "Hey, I've got an idea." And they said, "What's that?" I said, "Well, every time I go to the local airport, there's a sign that says, keep your eyes out for terrorism. Call this number, 1-800-GH-SECURE.
Oh, boy.
So I said, "Why don't I call the number?" And they said, "Well, what are they going to do?" Now, this was 2007. So we're 5.5, 6 years from 9/11. I said, "I don't know, but it's the only thing that I can come up with." They said, "All right, well, call." So I call the number on a Saturday morning, and I'll never forget, a woman answers the phone, and she says, "FAA General Aviation Security Line, how can I help you?" And I said, "Well, I'm calling because I need to report my aircraft stolen." And she said, "Oh, well, that's really not what this number is for. You've got to call your local sheriff's office or police department and have them come out and take the report." And I said, "No, I don't think you understand. It's not a normal airplane." She says, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "It's an airliner. It's a big, large airplane." She goes, "Well, what kind of airliner?" And I said, "It's an MD-87. She goes, "Are you with an airline?" And I said, "No, it's a privately owned airplane turning into a corporate jet."
Did she go, are you sure it's not an MD-83?
Yeah, she goes, can I get the measurements on that?
She didn't do that. She didn't. That to her, she didn't have any Russian blood in her background. So all of a sudden, her whole tone changed, and she says, "Hold on a minute." So she puts me on hold for about 30 seconds and gets me on the phone with another gentleman who says, if this is a civil dispute, and I go, listen, let me tell you what the story is here. I said, we still own the airplane. The title is in escrow. I said, but it is an MD-87. It's a former Austrian Airlines airliner. It took off about 15 minutes ago from Fort Worth. It's supposedly heading to Gander, Newfoundland. I said, as far as I know, there's 6 or 8 people on it. It doesn't have an airworthiness certificate. It doesn't have any RVSM letters. It doesn't have any authorizations whatsoever. As a matter of fact, the whole interior of the thing hasn't been certified by you people yet. And people got on it and fueled it up, and I don't know who they are. So if you want to say, oh, it's a civil matter, that's great. But if they take that airplane and fly it into something, I don't want you people coming back and pointing the finger at me. And at that point, everything changed. So he says, hang on, give me 1 minute, I'll get back with you. And over the next 45 minutes to an hour, now you got to remember this is 2007. So conference calling and, three-way calls and wasn't really a thing back then. And within 45 minutes, we were on a conference call with no less than 30 people on the conference call. and it was literally one guy who they got on the conference call. Somebody said, hey, bring the Northeastern manager of such and such on. And 2 minutes later, this guy comes on the call. This is Joe Johnson. I'm the Northeast Regional Manager of Air Traffic Control. You have to excuse me. I'm on a fishing boat. What's going on? And literally the guy's on a boat, like bass fishing someplace. They got the White House. They got the Air Force. They had the Air Force in Magic Mountain on. And about 45, 50 minutes into the phone call, they decide they're going to launch fighters and they're going to force the airplane down someplace.
Oh, man.
And now they are trying to figure out where to put it down. And then once they put it down, how they're going to deal with it from there. So now they got the FBI, they have local police, everybody and their brother, and they decide they're going to divert the airplane to Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Wait, so this is all going on while you're on the phone? They're discussing all of this stuff?
All this with me on the telephone. and I'm listening to all of this. So now it's about an hour and 15, hour 20, maybe an hour 30 minutes. And I'm starting to get really concerned because airplanes going further and further north. And I'm thinking to myself, once this airplane gets to Canada, who knows what's going to happen and if they'll ever even be able to get it back.
Right.
So airplane gets out over one of the Great Lakes and they're watching it. And back then, I don't believe this is now, but back then, when you were controlled by air traffic control, they used small pieces of like paper tape and they would put them on plastic tag strips. Yep. So some controller is controlling this airplane and there's buildups that particular day. Now, let me tell you real quick about the crew. They're Russian experts. Remember the guys with the tape and the wheel? They had gone out and found 2 unwitting American Airlines pilots who they had recruited for $1,000, $1,200 a day and said, hey, we've got to bring this airplane that we own back to Russia. Your current MD-87s? Yes. Will you fly it back for us? Sure. These poor guys assumed not only that it was their airplane, but that all the proper paperwork was in place, which there was not. At the end of this whole thing, their tickets were revoked.
Oh.
So
were they current American Airlines pilots?
At the time they were, yeah.
Oh.
I'm sure it's guys that never done a contract trip before and didn't know, check that it had RBSM and all that stuff. That sucks.
I'm absolutely 100% positive of that. The whole arrow thing. Is there an airworthiness registry? Anything? And they had done none of it. But so in any event, they're flying along and they don't know anything is good, bad, or indifferent. And there's buildups. So they say to the controller, hey, can we get 20 right for weather? And the controller says, yep, you're clear to deviate left or right of course as necessary. And they said, okay, great. Well, the controller never wrote that on the strip. 2-3 minutes goes by, and he says, time for my break. So he gets up, and they hand control of this airplane over to another controller. He's sitting there 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it was, and all of a sudden his phone rings, and it's NORAD. And now we're listening on the conference call, just like we are now. I'm listening to all of this, and people are chattering, and there's also a separate conversation going on that I can't hear. And they launched these fighters from someplace in Illinois, and now we can hear the ATC live over the phone. And we can hear the fighters on the military frequencies over the phone through NORAD. So the fighters get vectored in on this airplane, and they pull up behind these two guys flying in this MD-87 that they don't know is stolen. And, they get in position behind them. And now they pick up the phone and they tell the controller, call that airplane and tell them, per National Command Authority, you're being diverted to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to send them and vector them into Milwaukee. And they had told the fighters that if they twitch in the wrong direction, they had already pre-discussed this, and we listened to this. First fighters to go in front of them, fire the chafe, and give them 30 seconds, and if they don't comply, they were going to blow them out of the sky over top of one of the Great Lakes.
Oh my God.
And meanwhile, you're putting that on hold and calling your insurance company just to make sure your policy is.
So it's funny you say that. So now at this, when this all started to go down, I was in my backyard, and I had a Belgian block wall. And I was pacing on the Belgian block wall for about an hour. And then I eventually went in and got onto my home computer. And I think at the time I still had AOL or MSN Messenger or something. And I'm back and forth with my business partner and our lawyer on this whole thing. And when they were discussing that was exactly what my partner Dan had said to me. He goes, do you think our insurance is going to cover us if they shoot this airplane out of the sky? And I said to him, I go, well, I don't know if it will or it won't, but it serves the bastards right. So now everybody's in place, and we're all listening with bated breath. And the controller says, okay. So he keys the mic up and he says, November 871 Delta Pop, per National Command Authority, you're being diverted to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Immediately turn right, heading of, 120, descend and maintain 15,000. And probably 25 or 30 seconds, maybe a minute before that happened, these two pilots were up in the cockpit going, wow, there's that big buildup out there. What do you think? You think we're going to make that? No, I don't know. It doesn't look like it. All right. Well, let's, turn 30 degrees to the right and we'll go around the buildup. So as the controller is telling these guys, turn right to a heading of 120, they roll the heading bug left to, 270, and they hit the heading button. And the next thing you hear is the lead fighter go through the mask. Negative. They're going in the opposite of what they were instructed. And the next thing you hear is the warble and the tone. Beep.
No.
And I swear to God. And now I'm like, holy shit, they're going to splash this airplane. They're really going to shoot this airplane down. And, the one thing that I tell everybody who I tell this story to is, this was, like I said, 5-6 years post 9/11. And I would tell everybody, even then, not a doubt in my mind, 9/11 would never happen again, because they were absolutely ready, locked and loaded to splash that airplane without a doubt.
Wow.
So NORAD directs the second fighter to initiate, they called it a maneuver, and I forget what they called the maneuver at the time. And this F-16 kicks around in front of them and fires the chafe. Matter of fact, probably bounced the chafe off the side of the airplane. And got their attention. They stopped the turn. They turned right, and they complied. So now they're headed to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we're still listening to this whole thing as it's going and vectoring them on to final. Airplane's on short final, and my cell phone rings with a number from Moscow, and it was the deputy chairman and his translator, Vadim. And I said, everybody's got to hold on. I'm getting a phone call from Moscow. And one of the experts in the back of the plane, when they got cell service, I guess called them and said, there's fighter jets forcing us down somewhere in the United States. And I got on the phone with Mr. Zuboff, and his words to me exactly were, we did not know that you and your business partner were such powerful men in the United States. And my answer to him was, we pay our taxes just like everybody else does. So airplane comes in and lands, and the FBI sends an HRT, hostage rescue team, onto the airplane. They flashbanged the airplane, burnt the carpet, and they dragged everybody off the airplane, took everybody into custody. And now it became somewhat of an international incident. So, they determined, yes, there's no airworthiness certificate. They had nothing, and they took everybody away. So what happens now was, within 20 minutes, a half hour of the airplane being on the ground, now all of a sudden the Russians want to pay us all the money that they owe us, and we're going to take care of this, but please, you must get the airplane released, which of course we couldn't do. So through their connections in the Russian government and so forth and so on, back and forth, it was, what ended up happening was the FAA issued them a special ferry permit to ferry the airplane back to Fort Worth, Texas, where it was supposed to come from, where it was supposed to be, or where it was, so that now the FAA can, complete the certification process or do whatever. So Monday comes, and of course, this is all over the news. This was very big news back then. That was some of the articles that I had sent you. And first thing that happened was the company, Sistema, was publicly traded on several different markets, London, I think it was on the U.S. Stock Exchange, maybe the Canadian Stock Exchange. And once this got out, their stocks started to take a terrible, terrible hit. And matter of fact, the first truck that showed up at my house to interview me with big satellite dish was Bloomberg. And Bloomberg was all over this, Bloomberg News. Well, the Russians now, once the airplane goes back to Fort Worth, they now want to back off on their deal. Well, we still don't have the airplane. You've made us look foolish. You know, we're not going to pay you all the money we owe you. We're going to pay you 10% of the money we owe you. And it went like that. After we'd had an agreement with them to basically hand them the airplane as it sits, pay us our money, and you guys figure it out. So at the time, I used to do a lot of commentary for both the New York NBC channel and the network NBC for aviation. Whenever there's a plane crash, I'd be the guy that, talking head that would get on the camera and talk about, flying and what may have gone wrong. So I had a lot of contacts in the news and so forth. So 2-3 days, they decide, you know what, you're just going to sign the airplane over to us, and we're not going to sue you, and we're not going to pay you the money. So we were supposed to have a conference call with the lawyers and the chairman and everybody. Now the airplane's back in Fort Worth, and I call up Bloomberg News, and I said, hey, tell your people, come on back up. I'm going to make them a statement at 2:00. I said, I'll go on the network with you right live on my front lawn. And they said, well, what's the story going to be about? I said, well, they said, we understand from Sistema that the whole thing's taken care of and you've come to an agreement. It was all a big misunderstanding. And I said, well, I'm going to get on and say live that the deputy chairman of the company is a liar and that they're cheats and that they're trying to screw us out of the money that they owe us again. And they said, but the deal was done. I said, the deal wasn't done. He told you that because their stock is tanking. So they go, oh, we'll have a truck come right up. So we now are on this conference call with our lawyers, their lawyer in the United States, and all the big shots in Russia. And we haven't told them any of this. And they're all arguing back and forth. And there's probably 20 people in it must have been a large, I'd never been in Zuboff's office, but it must have been a large cavernous office because there was always an echo. And everybody's fighting back and forth. And in the middle of this, you hear a phone go, beep, 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 beep. And you hear this voice go, Molot. And it was, I could tell it was Zuboff's voice. And he goes, ah, 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 ah. And he literally starts screaming over everybody to the point where he drowns out everybody else on the call. And he didn't speak English. And his translator, Vadim, says, gentlemen, we must stop. Mr. Zuboff has something very important to say. Very important to say. And we're like, okay, well, what's that? He says, Mr. Zuboff just got a phone call from Bloomberg News, and they told him you're about to go on camera and say that he's a liar and that there was no agreement. And I said, well, there is no agreement. That's why we're all on the phone call. No. Mr. Zuboff says you can absolutely not do that. You must tell them that they are honest and forthright people and that he's been telling the truth all the time, and we will initiate a wire transfer immediately. And within 20 minutes, we had our wire, and that was the end of that.
Wow. Well, what did you say when Bloomberg showed up looking for the story?
I said, oh, well, hey, they just finally agreed to it. Thank you very much. And they said, oh, okay. And they left. They don't.
Wow.
So, and that was the story of the Russian MD-87.
That's wild.
It's one way
so
to
what
get
ended
paid.
up happening with so then they took the airplane and it was out of your hair from then on, right?
They took the airplane out of our hair from then on and finished the airplane, although they did it without the tanks. And we ended up getting the tanks shipped back to us. And the funny thing was, those tanks were worth about $1 million. And the only thing we could use them for, and we were going to do for a while, and then we kind of abandoned it, was myself and my business partner were going to turn them into outdoor barbecues. we were gonna cut them in half and make them into barbecue pits but then we kind of abandoned that whole idea. And they operated the airplane for a short, I wouldn't say a short time, maybe 2-3 years out of Sheremetyevo. And I've really kind of lost track of the airplane after that. I'm sure it's somewhere in the world. Whether it's still flying or not, I don't even know.
Maybe they turned the airplane into a barbecue.
Yeah, they may have. I had spent a lot of time and done a lot of business in Russia. And matter of fact, I did not go back to Russia again until 2 years ago. I went back for World Cup. And before I even went for that, I made sure I knew where all the players were. And as I said, the chairman of the company, he had gotten sideways with Chairman Putin, and he had gone to jail. And the vice chairman, who we were dealing with directly, he's now teaching college, and some outside of Russia and some formerly held Soviet company, and all the players have since moved on. So I finally went back to Russia and had a good time. But they were really, really some very unhappy people when the F-16 showed up.
Oh, wow, man. That's a crazy... That, ladies and gentlemen, is a story.
Thank you so much for your time, Pete. Really enjoyed the story.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. That was great.
All right. Take care, guys.
All right, Max, we've got Zach on the line from Fit to Fly Apparel. Welcome to the show, Zach.
Hey, guys. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Welcome.
So, Zach, we have been searching. The people have been demanding some apparel from our show, surprisingly. I don't know, especially for about our buddy Ted. And so we were looking around for some brands and thinking, how are we going to print these shirts? Because we don't want to actually be in the business of making them ourselves. And we stumbled across your company and it looked like a pretty cool brand. So we were just curious if you could tell us a little bit about Fit to Fly Apparel and why you started it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I didn't know I was going to get into the apparel side of things either. I was kind of in the same boat. Like, it wasn't necessarily like my thing, but the inspiration and motivation kind of came about a couple of years ago when I was at Auburn. So Auburn freshman year, competed on like the swim and dive team, and just found out it just wasn't really for me. And after that kind of all happened, I kind of like went through the whole training process of the swim and dive team and really fell in love with the gym. And I guess it's safe to say now that I had a huge passion for flying and aviation for as long as I can remember. But when I stopped training on the swim and dive team, I had two things that I really, really loved, and that was flying and the gym and fitness. So when those two things kind of popped in my head, it was just like one day I was like, I want to combine these two things into one and just kind of make something where I can inspire aviators and pilots and flight attendants and everyone around the aviation industry how to stay fit, how to kind of combine these two realms into one. Because oftentimes you'll find that the aviation industry isn't necessarily the most fit industry. It's not necessarily the most advocates for health and nutrition, which is kind of crazy because when you're traveling and stuff, it's really tough. And so wanted to combine those two things into one, and that's where I came up with Fit to Fly Apparel, and just kind of roll with that. And so apparel kind of came about when there just wasn't necessarily anything in aviation where I wanted like to wear. Like, there wasn't any brand that I could say, hey, like that's a very clean, minimalistic, great looking apparel company. And so I wanted to make something that actually looked very clean and something I actually wanted to wear that kind of let people know that, yeah, I was a pilot, but I didn't want to overly, express it. So that's where we started designing very minimalistic products, things that looked very clean, modern, not so flashy, just something that kind of let people know that, the logo kind of said that, oh, okay, that looks a little bit like an airplane. I think that could be, someone in aviation. So that's where we kind of came up with that. And so then we got into apparel and, merchandise, accessories and stuff. And so, so collabing with you guys, now we're kind of getting into the field of, partnering up with some companies like yourselves who maybe, want to get into apparel themselves and, start going down that route, but they don't necessarily have a supplier, someone that can provide them with great looking apparel, something that actually, looks and feels good. That's, not just some Gildan, t-shirt that you get at like a ballpark. So your apparel, you guys have some awesome designs. I saw a couple of them recently, and we already started, printing them up, and they look and fits unbelievably well. And so, we go by the terms of our stuff doesn't necessarily not necessarily just look good, but it fits great too.
That's awesome. Interesting story. The big announcement here to everybody that they haven't heard before is that we're launching our own branded line with the Fit to Fly guys. So it'll have our own page and all of our own stuff on there.
Heck yeah, guys. And, you already saw some of the gear as well. And I hope at least the response that you guys had, it sounded like you guys really, really enjoyed it. So you guys want to give a little review? What do you guys think,
I think it's really cool. I mean, I designed most of the shirts, Max and I and my wife, so I like them. And there's and there'll be inside jokes. I mean, like you said, it's not like super blatantly obvious that it's aviation stuff necessarily. It's a lot of inside jokes and funny stuff for professional pilots. So I think if you're a professional, you'll like it. Now, I was just curious, Zach. So you're at Auburn, you're doing flight training, right? I mean, everything's shut down right now, isn't it? So what are you and your fellow students thinking about the current situation?
Right. So long story short, I'm actually no longer in the flight program either at Auburn. I'm currently doing my training out at an airport in Chicago, but I was in the program for the past 2 years, and they are completely shut down right now. Nobody is flying, and the whole school is vacant. Last I heard, they were going to try and do some stuff in the summertime, I don't know, maybe just double down on flight blocks in the summer to try and catch people up. But it's really unfortunate because the end of the semester is where everyone is really close to their check ride. Mm-hmm. It's not, ready to take them. So that's just, a big headache for a lot of kids. And I don't know. I really don't know what the plan is for a lot of students. I've talked to a couple of them, and they just said they're all just kind of stuck. So it's really unfortunate.
It is. It's going to cost them more money too to get back up to speed for their check ride. That sucks too. Is that not only the time but the money?
I was in flight training during 9/11. I was just started my sophomore year, and I think we didn't fly for 6 months. I remember.
No, was it that long?
It was a while, and part of that was there was an instructor shortage and some other things too. I think, but it was a while.
I remember I woke up. I had a multi-engine commercial training flight, and we saw the news, and I'm like, and then we saw where they shut down the whole national airspace system. I remember calling my flight instructor going, can they do that?
Don't they know who I am?
Jeez.
Oh man. Well,
6 months is a while without training, man. That's a long time.
Oh, I hope it's not that long.
I hope so too. I don't think it's going to be 6 months. I think it's going to be, I don't know. I mean, I'm no expert either, and I have no idea, what's going to happen, but I'm just hoping that some good news comes out soon and we can all just start training again this summer, because that'd be great. Summertime comes around, everyone's back in the air.
Well, yeah. I hope you're right. Hopefully it'll just be a little hiccup. All right, Zach. Well, if folks want to check out your apparel and the website, how can they find it?
Oh, they could find it at fittoflyapparel.com. And then did you guys want to let them know of your link, what your link is going to be?
Yeah.
So it'll be fittoflyapparel.com and then /215.
Awesome. All right.
Zach. Appreciate the time, man. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. Have a great one.
Hey, thanks, Zach.
Yeah.
All right. That's going to do it for part 1 of the stories episodes. We still got a lot more in the bank for a little bit later on.
Yeah, those are good. Some are funny, some are crazy, but it just helps remind everybody why we why we do this, why we fly airplanes, because it's always an adventure out there.
Yeah. And coming up, we'll have another episode of the other half of these stories in the next few weeks. And once we start getting depressed again, we'll do some like real life, like industry stuff for a while, and then we'll have another one.
Lighten it up again.
Yeah. But thank you so much to all of the storytellers. Again, most of them came from propilotworld.com. If you're not a member there, you should definitely check it out. Great network. Listen, we need a network right now. When there are tough times, it's more important than ever.
That's right. So keep your head up and keep your mind in the game.
That's right.
What goes down must always come up.
Of course. If you got a great story to tell or an idea about a show segment or really anything else, you want to write into the mailbag, it's info@215podcast.com. I will reply to your email within 18 to 20 business days. I think that's my going rate right now. Sometimes I get them right away, and then sometimes they slip through the cracks, but I'm going to do better, I promise. I've got nothing else going on right now. So you can also follow us on the socials. It's at 215 Podcast on all your favorite platforms. Instagram's where we do our finest work. And yeah, I think that's about it. 215 Podcast is the website, and then you'll also be able to access that new apparel store there. There'll be a link. So check it out. But until then, just remember,
flexibility is the key to air power.
See you guys.
Rock on.